Okay, we've done the amplitude and the period of a graph. Today we're going to do the phase shift and the vertical shift. And we're looking mainly at the sine and cosine graphs right now. What we did the other day, we had basically two equations, y equals a sine of bx, okay, and y equals a cosine of bx. Okay, and remember the amplitude is the absolute value of the number in front. It's the absolute value of a. And the period of the graph, we're using p equals 2 pi over the absolute value of b. Okay, so you can take that the equation that they give you. Where you have to be careful is if they give you one, say they give you one like this, y equals a negative 5 cosine of 1/4 x. Okay, so the amplitude is the absolute value of the number in front. So absolute value of negative 5. Remember, absolute value is the distance without regard to the direction. So the amplitude, absolute value of negative 5 is 5. Okay. If you do the period equals 2 pi over the absolute value of b. In this case, our b is a fraction, like 1/4, so it would be 2 pi over the absolute value of 1/4. And remember, that's like 2 pi divided by, if you have to rewrite it, it's like 2 pi divided by 1/4. The rule for dividing by fractions, invert that second fraction and multiply. So this graph is going to repeat every 8 pi. And then you could actually graph it on your calculator and look at the graph. Okay? Okay? That's what we did in section 2.3. When does it repeat? Yep. Yep. If they give you the picture, like on the sine graph, you know, when we did the sine graph, it starts at the origin at pi over 2, it's up at 1. Okay, at pi, it's down to 0. At 3 pi over 2, it's down to negative 1. And at 2 pi, it's back up to 0. So, and it just repeats. So it's at 0 going up. When is it at 0 going up again? Every 2 pi. Okay, so if they give you the graph, you can look at the graph and say, pick a point, and when does it get to that point and repeat again? Okay? But if they don't give you the graph, and they give you the equation, you ought to be able to figure it by the equation. Okay? Okay, so 2.3 we did amplitude and we did period. Today we're going to do phase shift and vertical shift. So 2 more variables they're going to put in on the equation. And we're still going to do just sine and cosine. So if I do y equals a sine, now on this, you actually have to factor the b out, and then x plus c in parentheses, and then plus d. Okay? And it's the same thing if you have cosine. Y equals a cosine b, and then x plus c, and then plus d. Okay. So the 2 new letters are the C and the D. Okay? For the phase shift. Okay, phase shift, if C is greater than 0, okay, it will slide the whole graph left the absolute value of C. If C is less than 0, it will slide the whole graph right. Absolute value of C. So, an example. Like if I said y equal, let's just go like -3 sine 2x plus pi over 4. Okay? That part, it's going to take the whole graph and slide it. Okay, pi over 4, and I will probably abbreviate it. Like I will probably abbreviate it just like this: phase shift, and it's going to go pi over 4. It's absolute value, so it's pi over 4, and it's going to go to the left. Okay, so let's take one, just a basic one, on your calculator. Okay, do this with me. First, check your mode. Make sure you are in radian mode. And let's do just zoom trig. Okay, so that's what it should look like. It's every pi over 2, and from negative 2 pi to 2 pi, and -4 to 4. Okay, now put in just the sine graph. Y equals sine of x. Okay, and graph that. Okay, there's the regular sine graph. Goes through the origin. Okay. Now go down to y sub 2. Okay, put in sine of x, and let's do the one. I'm not going to do all this. Let's just do the pi over 4. So x plus pi divided by 4. Okay. Now, when you're doing this one, let it start graphing and press enter. Okay. So hit the graph there. Okay, stop that. On this one, the calculator's understanding it. Yeah. Most of the time, I do put the fractions in parentheses, and you can put it in parentheses and then take them away and see if it had any effect. But it understood the order of operations. Good question. Okay. Okay, so can you tell what that graph's doing? It's taking that whole graph and sliding it which way? To the left. That is just opposite of what we think it should do. Normally, if you think you're going to add something, go to the right. But it's just opposite what you think it should do. And notice in this, there is a plus sign in there, okay, on both those equations. But it's just opposite, okay? And you can let it keep graphing. So it will take that whole graph and slide it to the left. That is what they call a phase shift. Phase shift is take the whole graph and you're going to slide it left or right. Okay? So in this case, you're going to the left. Okay, let's go in and change that plus sign to a minus sign. Okay? And now graph it and do the same thing. Press enter. Here's the original sine graph. Okay? And then you should see that takes that whole graph. Look at where it is on the origin. Takes that whole graph and slides it. Here's from 0, sliding it over here. It's actually sliding it pi over 4 to the right. So if I would have, if I go back to just the basic, y equals sine of x, and then if I do y equals sine of x plus pi over 4, it's doing a phase shift, pi over 4 to the left. So it's a plus sign, but it's sliding the whole graph to the left. If I do y equals sine of x minus pi over 4, then that's a phase shift of pi over 4 to the right. So it's just kind of opposite of what you think it should be. Okay? Okay? Everybody okay with that? And notice on these, because of this absolute value on both of those, will this ever be negative? No. The negative is just indicating the direction, so it's always going to be a positive value. Okay? And then if it's a plus sign, it's going to go to the left. If it's a negative sign, it's going to go to the right. Okay? The other thing we had in there is the D. Okay? So let's look at a graph first. Go back to your calculator. Leave the y equals sine of x in there. Okay, if you leave that in, y equals sine of x. Okay, and now this one I want you to do y equals sine of x. Okay, close the parentheses, and let's say plus 2. Okay, so go down to y sub 2 and do sine of x, close the parentheses, and then plus 2. Okay, so graph the original should graph y equals sine of x. Okay, and then notice the y equals sine of x plus 2. Okay, we'll take the whole graph and do a vertical shift up 2. Okay, so this one, then I just abbreviate it VS for vertical shift up. Oh, I better not show that. That arrow's not good there. It's up, vertical shift up 2. The plus sign is up 2. If I did like y equals the sine of x, okay, delete that second one and let's do minus 1. Okay, or just retype over, make that minus 1. So here's the original sine graph. If you close the parentheses and then minus 1, it's going to take that whole graph and do a vertical shift down 1. Because what it's really doing, let's say take that whole graph, subtract 1. So if this y value is 0 and you subtract 1 from it, it should be down to negative 1. If this y value is 1 and you subtract 1, it's going to be down to 0. Okay? So this one will do a vertical shift down 1. So now you should have all 4: amplitude, period, phase shift, and vertical shift. Okay? And the only one that's really not what you think it should be is the phase shift. If it's a plus sign, it goes to the left. If it's a minus sign, it goes to the right. And that's just kind of opposite of what we think it is. Okay, on the notes, okay, let's go back up here. On the vertical shift, okay, if D is greater than 0, okay, it's going to go up absolute value of D. If D is less than 0, it's going to go down absolute value of D. So will D ever be negative? No, because of the absolute value symbol. Okay, it's always going to end up to be a positive D. Okay. Okay. Now let's look at some examples. Okay. Say I give you y equals 2 cosine 3 x plus pi over 4 plus 5. And the author will say for the directions, find the amplitude, you can abbreviate it, find the amplitude, period, phase shift, and vertical shift. Okay, so in this one, amplitude, what would that be? Yeah, amplitude would be the absolute value of that number in front, so amplitude would be 2. the period, it's cosine graph, so it's 2 pi over the absolute value of b. And our b value is 3. So it's 2 pi over the absolute value of 3, which is just 3. So 2 pi over 3. The phase shift would be what? Pi over 4 to the left. You have to, on phase shift, you have to do both. You have to do the amount and you have to do the direction. Okay? And the vertical shift would be 5 up. Okay? Everybody okay with that one? Okay, let's. No, just so it's there and in the right direction. Okay, let's say I give you another one. Y equals a -3 sine 2x minus pi over 3. So amplitude would be, yep, because it's absolute value of the number in front, so amplitude is 3. The period is 2 pi, and I want you to write these down because for the other graphs, they're not necessarily the same formulas, so get used to the formulas. So this one's 2 pi over the absolute value of b, so 2 pi over the absolute value of 2, so it should end up to be just pi. And the phase shift would be pi over 3, and this one's to the right because of that negative sign. It's just opposite of what you think it should be, but it's to the right. And the vertical shift, none or 0, because there's no value out here. It's like plus 0, so none or 0. Okay. Okay. Any questions on that one? Okay. Y equals the sine of 2x plus pi over 3. Amplitude would be 1. So it's the absolute value of the number in front, and it's understood to be a 1. Okay, the period. Yeah, now this one you got to be careful.
Oh, sorry, I didn't.
Because that 2 is inside. Okay, so it looks like the b is 1, but actually you've got to factor out. If you look back up at this formula, the b is factored out. The number in front of the x has to be a 1. Okay, so the author's not going to tell you that. You just have to know you've got to factor that out. So if we factor that out, we take the 2 out. Okay, that's the same as, yeah, so what would we have inside? Pi over 6, right? So it's like multiplying by 1/2 or dividing by 2. You should be able to multiply this back to get the original. If you can't do that, then you've got an error. Okay, so now the period is 2 pi over the absolute value of b. So 2 pi over the absolute value of 2, so the period is pi. This graph should repeat every pi. And then the phase shift is pi over 6 which way? To the left. But if you don't factor out that 6, if you said your answer was pi over 3, if you're not paying attention, okay? So make a note here, star it, highlight it, something. Factor out the 2. And you factor it out of both of them. Okay, it's got to be factored out of the 2x and the pi over 3. Okay? So just when you think you've got it figured out. Okay? Okay? Okay, now I'm going to take you through some on the calculator. Okay? We're going to practice a little bit.